Hello and welcome to another Game Director Reacts video. In this video, I want to react and respond to some of the comments that you have left on our recent Dev Talk. Go a little bit in depth with our thought process behind some of these things, provide some answers, or just provide a reaction, whatever the comment is. So let's get started with a comment on combat. So here's a request for more Q and W combo skills. Improved passives to have a greater identity of the weapon. Many passives are limited to basic attacks. Well, the combat team constantly reviews which weapons have interesting enough choices, which weapons get played. So we do go over weapons and we do add new Q and W abilities where we feel they are needed. You will be glad to hear that passives in particular is something that we've thought about actually theming an update around and doing a pretty major overhaul of passives. We haven't put a timeline on that, so I can't give you any promises, but it's definitely an area where we do also see improvements are possible. The next comment is maybe something for 3 players. Hellgates 3 versus 3, Mists for 3. So the challenge with doing something like Mists for 3 is of course a question of, do we have enough people to fill each particular mode? In Mists, that might be a possibility. In other content that is more niche, like Hellgates, we simply do not have the player numbers to fill all of these different modes with players, because obviously you need a rather large player base playing a content at a particular point in time to actually fill it with an active player base and have enough players in the pool for matchmaking. So while we would love to support 3 versus 3 and various kinds of content, we always have to weigh whether a particular kind of content has enough interest in it to support all the different modes that we want to offer for it. The next comment says, a serious request is that they improve the anti-cheat so that there are fewer hackers with radar in the game, since many guilds benefit from this, as do many ganker groups. Well, so this is a topic I need to talk about a little bit more, because we've actually made some pretty important changes recently. We've been aware of certain possibilities to run radars that are outside of our game client for quite a while. And we've been monitoring and taking as much action on this topic as was possible. But we have been looking for a better technical solution that does not impair Albion's high performance, large scale battles, because these radars operate on player positions, knowing where players are, movement, and obviously all of that stuff is very time critical and needs to run on high performance for our large scale open world battles. Recently though, we have made some pretty important changes that have brought us forward a lot. I don't want to go into details because obviously that's a security topic and we don't want to give our game away. We're in a constant battle, but we do think that with the recent changes we just rolled out in a patch, we struck a major blow to anybody trying to gain an unfair advantage from radars, and that any future attempts to try to read player positions and display them on a radar will lead to detection from our anti-cheat software and therefore also to bans. So we're quite happy that we can report we've made some big progress in here, and of course this will be an ongoing battle and we will keep fighting that fight. Now, the next comment says, buff solo tracking rewards. They will surely make the open world more versatile and attractive. Thanks for that comment. We will certainly take another look at the tracking rewards for solo players in the future. A general comment on balancing, because this is a very challenging topic. So first off, the loot rewards from tracking are essentially balanced by the player base, because the price for them depends on the demand for shapeshifter items. So while we could increase the output of ingredients, that would not necessarily translate into greater rewards, because essentially the price for these items would go down and you would still be earning the same amount of money from the marketplace. So realistically, the only thing that we can really control is any kind of silver that we inject as a reward onto the tracking mobs. So we can in particular look at the treasure mobs that you're tracking. We could also consider adding some silver to other tracking mobs, although the reason why we haven't done that on a large scale is because we don't like to mix motivations. We want to have economic activities that generate resources to be their own motivation, and have silver generating activities separately, because otherwise you get silver generation motivated by an economic activity, and that injects silver and thus inflation into the game. It drives up prices for everybody. So yes, we can take another look at this, but there are some challenges in the balancing. The next comment here says, I like a new solo player update. Well, this upcoming update is largely aimed at solo players, or parts of it are largely aimed at solo players, in particular the solo open world experience, which, despite the challenges that it faces, we still believe that Albion's open world should be a place for everybody, and we're trying to make it much more accessible for solo players with the next update. The next comment is critical of the proposed changes that we want to make to the Royal Continent, as we're also revisiting the Outlands. So the comment says, T6 in the yellow zone is absolutely the worst, destroying the economy, and absolutely the opposite of what he said. People will not leave the yellow zone. Why risk it when you can farm tier 6 resource safe and easily arrive to craft tier 7? That's very bad for Gatherer and for the market economy. It's true that for a very long time, we have not had anything higher than tier 5 available in the yellow zones. However, with the upcoming update, we're making pretty significant changes to the reward structure in the Outlands, significantly improving rewards in the Outlands. So we feel there's some space there where we can offer a little bit more rewards in the safe zones for players who are still early in the game, to offer them a bit more progression, to try out the game before they feel forced into PvP zones. And that has a benefit to the game overall, because obviously more players that have more of a chance to explore the game mean more players for everybody. In terms of the risks to the resource economy, I'm not particularly worried, because we will be adding some tier 6 zones to the Royal Continent in the yellow zone. Those will provide some tier 6 resources, but compared to the vast scale of the Outlands and the vast scale of the roads and all the resources in the mists, the amount of resources that will spawn there will be very minor. In fact, I think in terms of resources, there will be a massive competition between players for those tier 6 resources on the Royal Continent, and the incentive to graduate into PvP content will simply be that these zones will potentially be farmed out most of the time. And we will not be increasing the spawn rates there to accommodate players to do this safely. I can say that from the very beginning, so don't have that be your expectation. This is to provide some way of seeing those resources, but most importantly, actually some way of participating in a bit higher tier PvE. But if you do want to get more advanced rewards or higher gathering rates, then you will still need to go to the PvP zones eventually. But this will open up some opportunities to explore content safely before taking that step. Will there be farming gardening fame? I don't know what that means in particular, because we of course have fame for farming already. You make your progress with farming fame on the Destiny board. I can see this to mean two things. Like, one is this maybe rankings for farming. That's something we could think about. The other could be, are you asking about journal progression for farming? That is something that's coming in the future of the journal. So please clarify if I didn't get that right. The next one is there any chance we can get a laborer UI update and a farmer laborer? Well, we've been wanting to rework the laborer system for quite a while. It's challenging to do because a lot of players are very invested in the way that the system works right now. And at the same time, from a design perspective, there's various things that we want to change about it. And we haven't found the perfect answer at this point yet. So we're kind of not adding any content to it, knowing that we still want to make changes, which is also why the UI is still one of the oldest UIs in the game. We will eventually get around to do it. I can't give you a timeline because this is really a question of having the right idea for laborers that we all believe in, that our players can also get behind. But when we get around to doing it, we will certainly consider a farming laborer as well. Can we display our mounts in our island? Maybe a new building or a mount home. So this is actually an idea we've had for a very long time, which we would love to do. The reality is we haven't gotten around to focus on sort of these vanity things that don't really provide content that players can play, but that are more for showing off. There certainly is a lot of room for this in Albion. And I do hope that at some point we get to the point where we can focus more on these sort of things, offer more of that, because I think they're a cool social opportunity, a good way to show off. But at the moment, we're still very concerned about making sure that Albion has enough content for people to play and that all the systems are working well. So I do want that in the future. I can't tell you when, unfortunately. Last question from this comment says, will there be daily events for farming? At the moment, that doesn't quite fit in with the economic incentives in farming, I think. I will have to take this outside of this video, though, to think a little bit about it. I can't tell you on the spot whether that is a good idea or not. I'll think about it. Make more island decorations and more options for the direction of buildings. I'm not sure about the second part of this question. I think it might have to do with the rotation that you can place buildings in. There's a reason why you can't rotate them the other way around because, well, the assets simply weren't designed in that way to be worked from that side. And the whole accessibility, readability, usability of it just isn't designed for that. In terms of adding more island decorations, we absolutely feel there is a room for having more island vanity, island social life, and all these things. However, we feel it needs to be part of a bigger push. So if we want to go into that direction, we also want to allow you to have public islands that you can visit, maybe have some kind of score or ranking for the vanity that's on the island, so you can really like invest yourself in making the coolest island possible. We have some concepts for that. Like I said in a different comment, at the moment, we're focusing still on the major gameplay systems, really making sure that there's enough content in the game for people to play. We will eventually get around to doing these things, and I'm super excited about that. The next question I have here asks about whether it be possible to have the royal armor display the guild colors instead of the regular design colors. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea for readability purposes. A lot of players learn what gear looks like, and we don't want the color of the gear changing based on guild colors when it comes to armors, because that might make things very hard to read. The second part of this comment asks, well, the game already has armors created from royal badges, so why aren't there weapons that will be created from royal badges? So royal weapons is a thing we've been wanting to do for a long time, and it's definitely on our list of future weapon updates. We do, of course, have other things we're working on. We're currently working on the crystal weapons. We're aware we still have to provide one more mage type weapon to match the other categories. So long story short, they will come eventually. Faction wars also deserve a better update. 100%, you're right. Faction warfare is a feature that we think has a very important role to play in the game. Faction warfare for us is an accessible way for players to get into large-scale fights. It's supposed to be an activity that you can just join in and have fun with in large-scale battles. It shouldn't be a pre-organized activity. It shouldn't require you to be part of some social group. It should be just an anytime play activity in our mind. And while that works to some degree in the current faction warfare system, there's a lot to improve there. Unfortunately, it's also a pretty major topic because the faction warfare not only has a pretty big complexity in terms of the system, it's also quite challenging to design something that is in the open world and still reliably works with like balancing, like getting you good fights, having a good experience just being able to join in, finding where you need to go, and at the same time not facilitating item teleportation. So there's a lot to consider. And I'll be honest with you, at the moment, we don't have a perfect design that we want to implement. And when we want to do this, we want to do this right. So we're 100% agreed we want to do this, but we also need to be convinced that there's a really good idea on the table that we want to do. Another comment here that says, did you ever consider adding a new layer of risk to the PvE of the game that would allow you to, first of all, boost the rewards, and second of all, create more PvE-only content, a way in which the risk could be present in PvE with partial loss, your inventory drops, but the equipped items don't. We have thought about this, and there's a lot to talk about when it comes to PvE. First off, we think Albion is a great game for PvP, and we will never stop focusing on the PvP. But there is room to also think better PvE. And thinking in this direction of like offering harder PvE with some risk is something that we've done a lot. The challenge with that is PvE is risky as long as you haven't figured out how to do it. As soon as a player has figured out how to do it, it will basically be something that they have almost zero risk in, because it just relies on them repeating a pattern that you learn. And that means it's very tough to balance in a way where the risk reward stays intact. Because as you're learning it, it feels extremely punishing if you lose things, and it might not be profitable. But then if we tweak up the rewards to compensate for that, as soon as you've figured out how to do it, the rewards become so good that they compete with any kind of PvP rewards that we give out. And then suddenly you have a pretty safe way of getting major rewards. And that is the challenge that we're always facing with the hardcore expeditions, where we have to kind of walk the line of having good rewards for a challenging PvE experience, but still not competing with actual PvP rewards, because otherwise why would you risk the PvP if you can safely get the same rewards in PvE? So that's the challenge to solve if we want to bring interesting PvE content, hard PvE content into the game. In this update, in the upcoming update, we will be upping the power curve for mobs in general. So we will be making the PvE more challenging throughout the game. That's a first step for us, though. That's just to make sure that there is actually PvE in the game that is challenging, that requires you to have good gear, that feels like it's an actual fight. And of course, we're also tweaking the rewards to go up along with that. But for us, that's just the first step in terms of thinking about how can we improve the PvE. The next comment says, the idea of a camp in the Outlands is honestly a very great idea, considering that the only available loot in the open world is basically just a treasure chest. Well, I wouldn't agree with that. There's a lot more content in the open world than just treasure chests. But yeah, we like the idea of camps as well, because they offer an objective in the open world. And while we do have roaming mobs that can be quite powerful and quite valuable, they feel quite random, and a lot of people don't really perceive them as clear objectives. Having camps gives you these objective points, and it's a cool way to offer a kind of guaranteed reward in the Outlands. And we're very excited to see how they play. Need random dungeon finder. Well, first off, there's a number of challenges surrounding the you are what you wear system because of the classless approach. Classifying players into what they are actually playing and what they should be doing, what role they should be taking, can be quite challenging. We see that in systems like Arena and so on, although I think that is a solvable problem. The second part is, as soon as you want to use this system outside of the safe zones, it becomes a problem of PvP and trust. We have not yet found a design that prevents a party finder system or a dungeon finder system to be used by people to find victims to kill in the open world. So any implementation of this would be limited to just the safe zones. So the order of operations for us here is to figure out the future of PvE in Albion and how we can offer more varied and interesting PvE experiences, and then see how do we get random people together for this. In the meantime, there's various ways to find a group. First off, you can start by playing expeditions as a beginning player, where we do have random groups coming together. And then, of course, you can use the looking for group chat to find a group. And, of course, joining a guild and finding people there to play random dungeons can be good. And even just going out into the open world and in the safe zones and asking people that you find in a static dungeon can be a good way to find a group. But yes, it'd be lovely to have a random group, a dungeon finder. Given that it's a safe zone only thing, though, we first want to figure out the rest of things before we implement something like that. The next question says, when will you improve hardcore expeditions? Many players like this content and nothing is done to improve it. We asked the company to pay attention to this content, which in my opinion is super fun. Whoever likes HCEs, leave a like for the company to see. Well, the company, I guess that's us. Let's talk about HCEs. HCEs are cool. They're the most challenging PvE content you can have in the game. However, they have a very, 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 very small audience. We can see this in the numbers. Compared to the overall game, they represent a very small part of the game. And the other challenge with them is, as I've alluded to in another comment, is finding the right balance for them, where they are not competing with PvP activities for rewards, but still feel rewarding for a player that's taking on that challenge. So the HCEs at the moment serve as one of the high-end PvE experiences that you can have in Albion Online, the other being probably Avalonian Dungeons. And I don't think we will be doing a lot on this system until we are ready to talk about the bigger future for PvE in Albion Online. So if you do have specific issues that are easy to address, please bring those up, because we're happy to address smaller specific issues. In terms of bigger topics like bringing new content to this, it has to be part of a bigger strategy for PvE in Albion Online. The next comment here says, I've been saying that this game needs some more PvE content for years, especially for the PvE only players, and with the new journal update, this should be a great complement. Albion could become a great MMORPG moving forward. Thank you for your comment. As I've alluded to in other comments, we also think that PvE would be a great addition, or more focus on PvE would be a great addition to the game that we already have. Again, we don't want to lose focus on our core vision, which is a player-driven world with full loot PvP and large guilds, large guild battles. That will always be the core of the game. But we do see a room for expanded PvE content next to this. And we're currently in the middle of the process of figuring out how to do that exactly. The next comment here says, custom UI is the best news I've heard in 8 years. You've been with the game for a very long time. Thank you very much. I do hope that we've had some good things in those 8 years, but maybe it's just the best thing that we've done in the past 8 years. We're also super excited about this. The custom UI, let's talk about expectations here. So what we're offering is a HUD editor, right? So you can edit everything that's in the HUD. The team has done an amazing job of making a lot of things possible, but we are focusing on the HUD at the moment. There are further optimizations and options coming to things like the inventory specifically, which you can also customize in the next update to some degree. But the focus here is currently allowing you to completely control your HUD experience. So I think that's really cool, and that's also the most important part of things. And yeah, we're looking forward to your feedback once it's out. What we really want to see is more inventory slots when you equip a higher tier bag. So a tier 4 bag is standard inventory, at standard inventory size, T5 to tier 8, all gonna add an extra row of slots for every tier of bag. Now that sounds like a cool idea until you consider what happens if your bag gets damaged and then becomes unusable. Adding new slots based on inventory, let's assume you want to equip a new loadout. That loadout contains a different bag. What happens to this? Do we block this? It's a nightmare in terms of inventory management. What happens if you do that? So I don't think that's the answer. I do think, because we have weight, and weight is supposed to be the primary limiter on inventory, we can revisit the amount of slots that you have in your inventory. And especially now that we're making some changes to how many slots you can see and how big the icons are in the inventory, look to the next dev talks to explain that in more detail. I think there's room to talk about how many slots you have in the inventory. So maybe not this exact thing, but we can possibly solve your problem of not enough inventory slots. I hope you add the ability to locate party members in the open world map. Yes, I hope we do that too at some point. It's one of those things that you would say like, yeah, why don't we have that? The reason is simply a technical one, a complexity one. Short answer is every single zone in the game is running on a different machine, technically speaking, and making all those machines talk to each other, or rather having like one central machine that manages this party, is a little bit of technical overhead and has always just been a bit too complex to just do. But it is on the list of things that I also would really like to see, because I think it's super helpful for parties trying to organize themselves. The next comment says, I hope that you'll bring a colorblind option with the new settings update. A few guildmates have been waiting for this, especially for marks on players when grouped. So unfortunately, the new settings updates does not immediately include a colorblind option. For now, it's going to be focused on saving your settings and then switching between different settings profiles. However, in terms of being able to deal with color blindness, especially for things like player names, and I don't know exactly what you're referring to when you're saying for marks on players when grouped. I'm not sure if you're referring to the icons overhead that you can put on players. For that, I would say we offer quite a variety of different icons and shapes. So I assume that you have options to deal with color blindness there. If you don't, please leave a specific comment explaining the challenge with those icons. But of course, there's a number of elements in the game that have predefined colors. And our solution for that is that we're hoping to allow you to customize as many of these colors as possible down the line. So in the future, we're hoping that you're able to customize things like display colors of names, so you can choose what color you want that to be displayed in, so you can customize it to your specific needs. And that'll be our strategy for dealing with color blindness in particular. The next comment I have here is, make a sound setting with an adjustable bar to automatically mute or reduce sound in cities. Tired of the noise of 100 mounts plus 20 axes dueling. So one way you will be able to address this in the upcoming update for Albion Online is by using the settings presets, which we'll still talk about in an upcoming dev talk. So you can then make a setting that controls things like audio or your graphics settings or whatever, save it, and have one for open world and one for the cities, and then use a hotkey to switch between them. So you can switch to your city preset on a press of a button, controlling audio to the levels where you like it. We can separately talk about having this as an automatic option as a bar, but that will be the practical thing that's coming in the next update. Please give us the ability to switch between weapon skill presets. So it's not so much of a pain to continuously manually switch between PvE to kill mobs and PvP immediately after. If I could mount up and press a button to switch between skill preset 1 and preset 2 for my loadout, that would be amazing. So essentially you can do this to a degree by having 2 different loadouts. And I guess what you're asking for is a hotkey to switch between those 2 loadouts. I think extending the loadout system to allow for multiple skill configurations is another layer of complexity on the loadout system that probably is a bit too much. But allowing you to fast switch between loadouts, that's something that I can forward to the UI team. Cool changes. In the game, most of the weapons are based on some kind of stacks. Constantly keeping track of the number of them during the fight is sometimes difficult. We have to watch the number of blades around our character, for example, or glance at the top of the screen. With the introduction of shapeshifters, we got a bar that shows their stacks just below health. Is there a possibility to introduce such an option also for the other weapons? I mean, will we be able to enable such a bar, for example, for swords and daggers? So let me first talk about what you can do in the next update for sure, which will be using the editable HUD. You can move your buff bar to the center of the screen, control its scale, also control how many buffs are being displayed, and thus make all your active buffs much more visible to yourself as you need to. In terms of making a specific new bar for a weapon, that's something that we would do in the course of a weapon update if we revisit an old weapon and reconsider how it works, its mechanics, its spell design, etc. And if we then feel that they need such a bar to really be playable, we would introduce it, but I think it would always have to be based on the specific weapon, because some weapons allow you to choose between builds where you either use the stacks or you don't use the stacks. And yeah, we'll have to make that be context sensitive and all these things. So for now, the practical solution is use the editable HUD to make your stacks more visible. Please add the option for transparent UI/HUD in the game as player tag, minimap, skills, etc., all static elements to protect OLED users. So the good news is that with the upcoming editable HUD, you should be able to do just that. I think for almost all elements, you will be able to control transparency. There might be a few elements that in the initial version cannot be controlled in such a way. But that is something that we will then revisit down the line. The goal is to give you as much control over your HUD as possible, and transparency control is also part of that. Please make custom control for phone players too, where we can make our own controls and spell placing. So the interesting thing about the editable HUD is that it was actually an innovation coming from our mobile team. So our mobile developers started developing this customizable HUD for the mobile version. And when we saw it, what they were doing, we told them, you know, we would really love to see this for our PC players too. So now we're rolling it out on both platforms. And we're very excited about it. In-game mail management needs an update. The most annoying thing from the beginning of the game is managing mails from the marketplace. Right now, there's only the option to go one by one or to mass delete them all. It'd be nice to see all buys or sell in one glance, or at least be able to jump from one mail to another instead of closing mail and opening another one. I think I will just forward that comment directly to the user interface team. In terms of what our vision here is in the long run, we would like to really have like a separate message tracker for the marketplace where you have all the information coming in from the marketplace somehow filterable and all those things. But in the meantime, while the mails are the way that we get those messages, I can see some of this being added to the mail UI without too much of a hassle. So let's see. Text selection feature, please. Sometimes we need to copy Korean or Chinese to translate it. Yes, absolutely. I don't know the intricacies of what complexity this would add to the chat in terms of mouse interaction and so on. But generally, I completely understand the need, and we'll forward this and see how we can get it done. The next comment says, cool, I have something to ask. Can you guys give me a free mammoth? Well, yes, absolutely. All you have to do is level up, go out, kill a mammoth, and get really lucky. But it's all free. The next comment I have says, Albion is a great game, but it feels like we don't have a purpose sometimes. We wander off slowly and leave the game. This has happened multiple times with me and many others I know. I know we can't change the game instantly. Then what if we host competitions like Minecon, where the whole server competes on different tasks, like most silver earned within the allocated time, most kills, most Crystal League wins, etc. You know what? I actually absolutely love this comment. I've thought about this kind of topic a lot. I've more thought about it from the perspective of rankings and local rankings and giving you more an opportunity to show off, something that you're good in locally. So my ideal vision would be that we have a ranking for almost everything in the game. But actually, I really like the idea of having temporary challenges where you're either asking the whole server or a certain area of the game to all compete in like earning the most mob fame or earning the most silver. So that's an idea that I will play out in my head and see if we can take it anywhere. Will there be a branch of gunpowder weapons in Albion? Blunderbusses, pistols? This is something I've had in my mind since the inception of Albion, basically, since the very beginning, since we started to define the story of the world and where we actually play. Because when we're in Albion, we're in a fantastic world that's being rediscovered, that's full of magic, and technology only comes into it sparsely. Like this isn't a technology-driven place. However, in the old world, which represents the oppressive, common, dreary life, blunderbusses and pistols are a common thing. And black powder weapons on ships also exist. So if we ever see some people coming over from the old world, there's a good opportunity that we will also see blunderbusses and pistols. The next comment I have here actually matches the gunpowder question nicely. It's the question whether it's possible to add naval battles on ships. Here's the thing about naval battles. Absolutely would love to do it. We've had a concept for this lying around for ages. And I absolutely do see naval battles sometime in the future of Albion. However, we have to be aware that this is a game in a game situation, right? Like, there's not going to be a way to really make your equipment and your character matter in a naval battle. So if we do this, there's going to be completely different progression, completely different controls, a lot to rethink. So as long as we still have systems in the core game that we're not entirely happy with, this is not something that we're going to focus on, most likely, right? Unless we have some kind of reason that I don't see right now. But it is absolutely something that I have a concept in the drawer for, and as soon as we're out of other ideas to do and things to fix, it's the first thing that I'm going to do. The next comment here says, I would like to see a guild mission board added to every city where you could do a daily mission like gathering, hunting, exterminating, and finding items in dungeons. It would be great if it could be managed by players and even put up wanted posters that count as an achievement. It'd be great as an introductory element and would help those who are just starting out to learn the different mechanics of the game in a didactic way. Well, my thoughts on this is we actually now have quite a lot of guiding systems for Albion. With the journal, we've basically created a centralized place that is essentially going to cover everything that you can possibly do in Albion and guide you to do it to some degree, but at least make you aware of the existence of something and also give you some goals. Our next step in terms of and on top of that, we have things like the daily activities, we have ADCs, we have all kinds of activities, right? To me, the next step is to revisit the structure of the beginning experience of Albion and think about how we integrate the journal smoothly, possibly rework the initial narrative, and make sure that new players are properly guided to their area of interest in the game and understand the scale of the game as soon as possible after joining without being scared off from the complexity. So there's a lot of thought that will need to go into that. I don't see us adding new daily systems on top before we've structured what we have in a better way, if that makes sense. The next comment I have here says, add friendly NPCs in the open world where they would give random quests like delivery, killing mobs, clear a dungeon to save other NPCs, etc. for rewards. Now, if you're an alpha player of Albion Online, you might actually remember our mission agents that we had very early that essentially were this in a way, where we had NPCs out in the world that would provide missions that you could play locally. I do think that what they were lacking is a narrative structure and an overall reason to pursue these quests. So we eventually ended up cutting them from the early versions of the game. However, in the context of thinking about future PvE in Albion, I think it's absolutely something that is in our minds of how do we get some interesting PvE content into the game that doesn't compete with the PvP and integrates well with the game world. And we'll definitely revisit that line of thinking and think about, is there anything from that concept that we can save that would make the game better? The next comment says, I'm looking forward to my return to the Black Zone. I'm also really looking forward to returning to the Black Zone, and maybe we'll have an exciting battle in the Black Zone and your name will end up in my kill history. Next question I have here is, what about the server transfer / char merges? Well, I think it's too early to talk about. Like we said in the context of launching the European server, this is something that we wouldn't be talking about for quite a while after the server launch, because the economies need time to develop newly, freshly started characters on those servers. First need to develop to a point where any transferred characters would not be competing with them in terms of power or wealth or whatever. So I think that question is too early. It's definitely something that we will continue to look at in the future, but it's not something that we're thinking about this year. And with that, we've also reached the end of the comments that we've selected for this video. It's already become very long. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to presenting the next update to you in the next Dev Talks.